If you manage to build your TFSA up to $1 million by 2052, here is what that actually buys you. About $526,000 worth of today's groceries, hydro bills, and property taxes. Same 7 figures on the statement. Roughly half the life. That is not a rounding error. That is what 2.5% inflation does to a big round number over 26 years, and it happens quietly, in the background, while most people are busy feeling proud of the milestone. Banks love printing TFSA millionaire in a headline because it sounds impressive. Nobody prints the second sentence, the one where that million only spends like $526,000 once you actually get there. If you are somewhere between 55 and 65 right now, this matters more to you than it does to someone in their 30s. A 30-year-old has 40 years for compounding to paper over a bad target. You do not. You likely have 10 to 15 years of contributing left before you are living off this account, instead of adding to it, which means the target you aim at has to be the right one the first time. I have seen people do everything the guides told them to do, hit an impressive balance, and still feel behind once they actually retire and start spending from it. The number was never wrong on paper. It was just never adjusted for what a dollar would actually buy by the time they needed it. So in this video, I am going to show you why $750,000 in real, today's value dollars is a smarter goal than a flashy $1 million nominal one, and the exact mechanism that keeps your tax-free income covering your actual groceries and property taxes, instead of just looking good on a screen. If you are in that 55 to 65 window and you are done chasing numbers that sound good but do not spend well, subscribe to the playbook. We deal in real Canadian retirement math, not marketing. At an average inflation rate of 2.5%, $1 million sitting in your TFSA in 26 years has the buying power of about $526,000 today. Not half by accident, half by arithmetic. The mechanism matters more than the number itself. Every retirement calculator you have ever plugged numbers into shows you nominal growth, the big satisfying figure climbing on the screen. What almost none of them show you clearly is the line underneath it, the minimum return you need just to stay even with the cost of living. Call it your protection line. Beat it, and your money is actually growing. Match it, and you are standing still while feeling like you are moving forward. Fall short of it, and you are going backward even as the account balance keeps climbing. Walk through the math, because it takes 10 seconds and it changes how you should be thinking about your target. Take $1 million as the goal. Apply 2.5% inflation, compounded every year for 26 years. That $1 million divides down to roughly $526,000 in today's purchasing power. 4 numbers, 1 result, and the result is the only one that matters when you are the one paying for groceries with it. The Bank of Canada's actual job is to keep inflation near 2%, not the 2. 5 cents used in this math, so this is a deliberately cautious number, not a scare tactic. It matters here because it means even the conservative version of the future still cuts your million roughly in half. For retirees specifically, costs like healthcare, home maintenance, and prescription co-pays have tended to run above that average for years, which is one more reason 2.5% is the safer number to plan around, not the aggressive one. Banks are not lying when they show you $1 million by retirement projections. They are just showing you the number that sells, not the number that spends. For someone in their 60s chasing that headline figure, the temptation is to reach for extra growth through riskier bets late in the game. That is the invisible cost of chasing the nominal million at this stage of life. Not a bad year in the market, but a bad year with no working years left to earn it back. But maybe your account does not look anything like that right now. Maybe you are not starting from $100,000 today. Maybe your TFSA sits at $10,000 and you are 58, wondering if this entire conversation even applies to you. It does. Is the dream dead? No, but the path to it looks different than the one built for someone with 30 years left to compound. And the next few minutes are about exactly what that path looks like at your stage. For the next 15 years of your working life, your TFSA should not be treated like the cautious, boring account tucked away for a rainy day. It needs its own plan. I call it the 15-year high-growth bridge. And it looks nothing like the advice most 55-year-olds are handed. I used to be one of the people telling everyone to shift into bonds the moment they hit 55. I was wrong, and I will say that plainly. With inflation running the way it has, and people living longer than the old retirement math assumed, your TFSA actually needs to stay in growth mode longer than your RRSP does, because it is your last completely tax-free bucket, and tax-free growth is wasted sitting in low return, low volatility holdings for a decade and a half. Ask yourself when you last actually looked at what is sitting inside that account. Growth-oriented funds, or something closer to cash that has been quietly losing ground to inflation for years, without you noticing. The bridge works because compounding does not need 40 years to bend upward. It needs enough uninterrupted years, and 15 is enough, provided the money is actually invested for growth instead of parked somewhere that barely beats a basic savings account. You are not staking your whole retirement on this one account either. Your CPP and OAS payments still land every month underneath it, and that floor is exactly what gives the TFSA room to stay in growth mode a little longer than people assume. The trade you are making is a few more years of market ups and downs in exchange for a much bigger tax-free number by 70. And for most people in this age bracket, that is a trade worth making deliberately, not by accident. Put real numbers to it, and the picture becomes clear. Say you are 55 today with $10,000 already inside your TFSA, which is a realistic starting point for a lot of people, not the exception. You contribute the 2026 limit of $7,000 every year. You hold a growth-tilted portfolio averaging 7% annually. Run that forward 15 years to age 70, and you land at roughly $215,000. Every dollar of it tax-free. The part that surprises most people is this one. $215,000 inside a TFSA is often worth more to you in retirement than $350,000 inside an RRSP, because RRSP withdrawals count as income and can push you toward the OAS clawback line, while TFSA withdrawals do not touch that calculation at all. Same effort, same discipline, very different outcome depending on which account you built it in. Think of that $215,000 as an insurance policy, not a nest egg. It exists so that a bad year, an unplanned expense, or a property tax bill that landed heavier than expected does not force your hand or drag you into decisions you would not otherwise make. Let me show you exactly where that CRA line sits, because most people find out where it is by accidentally crossing it. In 2026, the OAS recovery tax, most people just call it the clawback, starts clawing back your old age security once your net world income crosses $95,323. Cross that line and the government takes back 15 cents of your OAS for every dollar above it, on top of whatever income tax you already owe on that money. The reason this happens is straightforward once you understand it. OAS was never built as an unconditional benefit for every retiree regardless of income. It came with a recovery mechanism baked in from the start, one that reduces the payment as your other income rises. Most people never bump into it until a single large withdrawal puts them there by accident. This is where it quietly catches people who did everything right. You have a decent RRSP or RRIF, maybe a small workplace pension, and one year you pull an extra $10,000 out to fix the roof, replace a furnace, or cover a car insurance renewal that landed heavier than expected. That withdrawal gets added to your income for the year, And if it pushes you over $95,323, you are not just paying regular tax on it, you are also losing OAS you were counting on. A $10,000 withdrawal can end up costing you meaningfully more than $10,000 once both hit at the same time. That threshold has moved over the years, but it has never moved anywhere close to keeping pace with the actual cost of living for a senior with decent income. Go back a decade and the line sat noticeably lower, yet pensions, part-time income after retirement, and RRIF minimum withdrawals have all grown around it in the meantime. Property taxes, insurance, prescriptions, all of it climbs faster than that line does, which means more people cross it every year without changing their spending at all, just because the number sitting still is the government's, not yours. This is exactly why the TFSA earns its keep here. Treat it as your variable income bucket. Keep your RRIF withdrawals at or near the required minimum so your reported income stays comfortably under that $95,323 line, and pull whatever extra you need, the roof, the trip, the gift to a grandchild, from the TFSA instead. None of it counts as income, none of it touches your OAS. It works beautifully on paper, right up until the market has a bad year the same year you retire. That is exactly where most $1 million TFSA plans quietly fall apart, and it is worth understanding before it happens to you, not after. Picture the worst case timing, not the worst case number. Your TFSA hits a strong balance right as you retire, and in year one of actually living off it, the market drops 20%, not over a decade. In that first year, the one where the timing hurts the most. This is called sequence of returns risk, and it explains why two people can have identical average returns over 20 years and end up in completely different places, purely because of which year the bad one landed in. Picture someone who is not prepared for it. They already booked a trip, a cruise maybe, something they had been planning for years. The account is down, but the trip is booked, so they sell TFSA units to cover it anyway. Say the holding was worth $10,000 before the drop and $8,000 after. They withdraw the $8,000 they need. What almost nobody realizes going in is that you only get back the contribution room equal to what you actually withdrew, not what the investment used to be worth. That $2,000 of value is gone permanently, and so is the room that would have let you rebuild it tax-free. I've watched people make exactly this decision, sell into a drop to cover a trip they already promised themselves and regret it 2 years later once the room never came back. The alternative is not complicated. Keep a cash wedge inside the TFSA itself, roughly 2 years of planned withdrawals held in something boring and safe like a GIC ladder, sitting alongside your growth investments rather than mixed into them. In 2022, a fairly ordinary portfolio split between stocks and bonds still saw double-digit drops. Someone holding 2 years of safe, GIC-based money inside their TFSA did not have to sell a single share of their growth holdings to cover that year's spending. The crash happened around them, not to their withdrawals. That protection is not free. You are trading a bit of maximum long-term growth, because that cash wedge does not compound the way equities do, for the certainty that a bad year does not force a permanent wealth-destroying decision. It is not a strategy you build during the crash, when the panic is already loud and the decisions get rushed. It is a strategy you build in the calm years before it, while you can still think clearly about what 2 years of spending actually costs. For most people within a decade of retirement, that is a trade worth making on purpose. So how do you actually build something like this without handing 2% of your account to someone in a suit every single year just to manage it? That is the next piece. None of this requires anything complicated. 3 moves cover almost all of it. First, figure out your actual real dollar target instead of borrowing someone else's. Take what you currently spend in a year and estimate what that same lifestyle costs after 15 years of average inflation. You do not need software for this. Just the same math from earlier in this video, applied to your own numbers instead of a stranger's headline figure. Someone spending $60,000 a year today needs a noticeably bigger pile in 15 years than someone spending $40,000. So a single generic target was never going to fit both of them. That is your real target, not $1 million, not any other round number that happens to sound impressive. Second, use your room. The 2026 TFSA limit is $7,000, and if you have unused contribution room going back to 2009, when the account was introduced, that room does not expire. Prioritize filling it before you put new money into a taxable non-registered account, because every dollar that grows inside the TFSA instead of outside it grows without ever owing tax on the way out. Third, think about where you hold what, not just how much. Put your highest growth potential investments, your equities, inside the TFSA, where none of that growth is ever taxed. Put your more conservative, fixed income holdings inside the RRSP or RRIF, where the growth was always going to be taxed as income whenever you withdraw it anyway. Matching the right asset to the right account is a free upgrade that most people never bother making. But maybe none of that lands for you yet, because underneath the numbers, there is a different problem. Maybe you are scared of the market, and you have watched too many crashes to fully trust it again. That feeling deserves its own conversation, because it is not irrational, and it is not something you can logic your way out of with a spreadsheet. If your TFSA sits at $5,000 while the news keeps running stories about TFSA millionaires, it is completely normal to feel behind, maybe even a little embarrassed about it. That feeling is common, and it says nothing about whether you are capable of catching up. The shift that actually helps is simple. Stop comparing your year 1 to someone else's year 20. This account has only existed since 2009. Nobody alive is a natural at this. Everyone who has a large balance today started with zero at some point, and most of them did not start early either. Instead of chasing someone else's total, focus on what your TFSA can actually do for you. Even $50,000 inside it can fund roughly 5 years of early retirement spending before you ever touch CPP, which becomes especially useful if you decide to wait until 70 to start it and let it grow larger in the meantime. That is not a small account. That is a bridge that buys you years of flexibility. The whole idea comes down to this. $1 million is a vanity metric. $750,000 in real. Today's value dollars is the actual goal, the one that still buys groceries and covers property taxes when you get there. Build it with a 15-year growth bridge if you are starting later than you would like. Protect it with a cash wedge before any market downturn forces your hand, and use it as a shield that keeps your income under the OAS clawback line instead of over it. You do not need a degree in economics to do any of this. You just need to understand one thing clearly. Inflation behaves like a quiet, permanent tax on money that sits still, and the TFSA is the one account in Canada that lets you opt out of it completely, as long as you actually use it the way it was built to be used. If you found this useful, subscribe to Brian's Canadian Retirement Playbook. We keep the math grounded in what actually happens to real people, not what sounds good in a headline.